Let me call the meeting. We're now live on YouTube. Let me call the meeting to order. It's 4:03. It's a special meeting of the governing body, May 25, 2021, 4 p.m. Let me begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilor Casas-Sanchez, Mexico flag. Well, let's see. Councilor Vihel-Coppler, can you lead us in that if at this time? We don't have a Councilor Lindell. And an invocation from Councilor Romero-Worth. And if we could all rise to participate, that'd be great. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and the Zia symbol of perfect friendships amongst united cultures.
Just a short couple of things. I want to reflect on the honor bestowed upon us to serve the community as the elected representatives of this community. And I just want to say that I'm thankful we can come together to this afternoon to discuss coming together in person. And I'd just like to take a moment to reflect on where we stand and the importance of the work we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there remembrances at this time? Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reflect on the life of George Floyd a year after his untimely death and how it shaped our lives and how we as not only as a community, but as a country continue to grow from that horrible, horrible incident. And may we all learn and grow and be better from that. And so I just want to remember Mr. Floyd's life.
Thank you, Councilor. It is a year ago. Anybody else with a remembrance? If not, let's just take a minute and think about Mr. Floyd and others we've lost in the past year and the toll of COVID and our prayers for coming out of it better than we were. Thank you, everybody. Could the clerk please call the roll so we can get the meeting going?
Yes, Mayor Weber.
Present.
Councilor Abeyta will be joining us momentarily. Councilor Casas-Sanchez. Here. Councilor Garcia.
Present.
Councilor Lindell. And she's also popping on momentarily. Councilor Rivera.
Here.
Councilor Romero-Worth.
I'm here.
Councilor Vihel-Coppler.
Here.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Present.
Double quorum, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Councilwoman Villarreal has moved to approve the agenda and Councilor Vihel-Coppler second. Could you call the roll on the motion, please?
Yes, Councilor Casas-Sanchez.
Yes.
Perfect. Councilor Garcia.
Yes.
Councilor Rivera.
Yes.
Councilor Romero-Worth.
Yes.
Councilor Vihel-Coppler.
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Yes.
Mayor Weber.
Yes.
Motion has been approved.
Very good. Thank you. That brings us to our decision and action items. Madam Clerk, can you introduce us to the items A and B that we'll be taking up?
Yes, Mayor. The first item is a presentation and discussion of in-person meetings of the governing body and our other committees. I have a presentation set for this, but I believe City Manager LePan Hill and our city attorney will be going over a few items before the presentation starts. So City Manager LaPenhill.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know this is a big meetings week, as all weeks are, but given all of the changing dynamics, we felt it was really important to get together as a governing body, as a unit, to discuss. So this is a work session that we are set to be on from 4 to 6. We will end at 6. We will limit our discussion to the time allotted. If we need to have additional meetings after that, we can, but we will limit our discussion at this time. And as the agenda reflects, this is to discuss our return to in-person meetings and our increasing of on-site operations. We are genuinely looking for your feedback. As you know, as we've all been living, we're living in uncertain times. The things we know are change. And so there is no right answer here. We need to continue to tweak it, do what's right for our employees, for our residents, for yourselves. And so the intention here is we are not presenting a plan. We're going to lay out information and provide a framework for discussion. So again, I really hope we can talk through some of these thorny issues, figure out what's going to work for us at this time, and know that it continues to evolve. What we start with now will be different than what we end up with in the fall. So that's the intention here tonight. So I hope we can have that dialogue and discussion. I'm going to turn it now to Aaron. As you all saw, we have a new order, which is coming before the governing body tomorrow night in council for a vote, but there's a lot of information in there that will impact this discussion. So we'll turn to Aaron, and then Christine will start on the in-person meetings.
Cool. Thank you, City Manager LaPenhill. I decided to start with my headphones today because my audio has been going in and out all day very quickly. So there was a new proclamation orders issued yesterday. We've been trying to time those so that if we need to extend, we do not have to have a special governing body meeting for that purpose. So this one was timed to end on Monday so that we could consider whether to extend it on Wednesday. So we have included a proclamation, or sorry, we've included a resolution to extend the proclamation on Wednesday's agenda. And the proposal is to extend it for 47 days, which will land us right before a July meeting. That's why there's an unusual number of days in that resolution. The updated order, as to Jarrell's point, in terms of things changing quickly, our last proclamation and orders had been really emphasizing the scarcity of vaccines back in March. And now we're in a place where we're just really trying to get vaccines out, and they are readily available. So that's some of the background context for that. And now there's also a lot of funding available for folks for both utilities payments and for evictions. So part of the updated order alerts folks that they should use this time now, where we're continuing the moratorium on water shutoffs and evictions, to obtain a payment plan and to obtain relief funding. And we've actually expressly stated a number of sources and websites and locations to obtain those funds. And Dave included those in his press release yesterday. So we're really hoping, apparently the renthelpnewmexico.org has a lot of funds available for both utilities and eviction protection, or eviction prevention and rent payments. So we're really encouraging people to use those. So that's one thing. We did extend those. As relevant to this discussion, we did update the facial covering order. There had been an order in place for all members of the public entering city facilities to wear facial coverings. That had still been in place. That was extended. And then alongside that, city employees, while they're providing direct city services, and city agents and actors, which would include contractors and committee members. I think someone's popping in on their audio. If someone's not on mute, I'm not sure who it is. So in addition to the public being required to wear facial coverings in city buildings, the city employees and city agents would also be required to wear facial coverings or are required to wear facial coverings when they are in those public spaces with members of the public and providing services to the public. If city employees, agents, contractors, committee members are in places that are not accessible to the public, the order provides that they should rely on vaccination status. And so it reverts to the state level rule, which is if you're vaccinated, then you have the ability to not wear a facial covering if you wish, but you certainly can still wear one. And that if you are unvaccinated, that you are required to wear a facial covering unless you're in your own personal enclosed space that doesn't impact others. So that's the framework that's in place in the new order. And then it encourages testing when folks are unvaccinated and are exposed. It updated our screening questionnaire for the public so that if someone's exposed, they only are restricted from entrance if they are unvaccinated as well. If they're vaccinated and exposed, we're not prohibiting entry. So that we've changed those criteria a little bit such that we recognize the likelihood of contracting the virus once vaccinated is very low. And I think those are the big points in the order. I did want to also just refresh people's memory as to the applicable parts of our emergency ordinance that we adopted very early on in the pandemic, as it related to being able, when we had to be present for meetings, or at least pursuant to Open Meetings Act for the governing body and committees subject to the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act itself says, if otherwise allowed by rule or law of the public body, a member of the public body may participate in a meeting of the public body by means of a conference, telephone, or other similar communications, which is what we've been doing, when it is otherwise difficult or impossible for the member to attend the meeting in person. And so using that framework, our code says, during a declared emergency, if it is difficult or impossible for a governing body member to attend a meeting in person, the member may participate in meetings by conference call or other similar communications equipment as permitted in the Open Meetings Act, essentially. And then so we did something very similar for our city council standing committees and other committees. And we said basically the same thing. During a declared emergency, members may participate remotely as permitted in the Open Meetings Act when it's difficult or impossible. So those are just some background. That's some background information.
Thank you. Jarrell, back to you for a presentation, or where are we going? Or Christine, who's got the mic?
Hi, Mayor. I can go ahead and start the presentation of Joe, if you will bring up the PowerPoint, then we can start to roll through. This, again, I think as City Manager LaPen Hill laid out, I'm just going to walk through kind of where we are and options, and then there's an opportunity for discussion. So I'll move through the first few slides fairly quickly. Erin gave a pretty good overview. Joe, if you could just cue up that first slide. This basically is the quick history. Obviously, we're currently required to follow the Open Meetings Act, as Erin mentioned, unless it's difficult or impossible to be present. There's just a little bit of history when we started that, which was March 11th. Joe, if you'll go to the next slide. On there, the state and local laws that basically govern us, again, just noted as background information. And then the next slide is really where we start to, where I'll kind of lay foundation for the discussion we're having today. So right now, as all committees are categorized, all the counselors received these categories when we first switched to them when the moratorium was lifted. So right now we have categories 1 through 5. The first is governing body. Category 2 includes our council committees, of course, our quasi-judicial and policymaking committees. Category 3 are our advisory committees. Category 4 is joint powers boards and committees. And then category 5 is our working groups. These are currently not subject to Open Meetings Act. I just want to note that. And then Joe, if you go to the next slide, I just list, this is the Excel spreadsheet that you all already have, but just wanted to do a quick overview that kind of gives you an idea of who is in what categories. So moving on, pre-pandemic, governing body was the only meeting that was broadcast on YouTube, the radio and government TV. No other meetings were broadcast on YouTube. The public could attend meetings in person. And of course, these were, this was done under contractors through the direction of the multimedia manager. So that's just kind of giving you a where we were. What we have now, Joe, if you'll, yep, there you go, is we're obviously right now we're 100% online using Zoom, and we have no in-person meetings. Category 1, which is governing body, is hosted on Zoom and broadcast on YouTube, radio, SFGTV, and of course our HD channel. Category 2 is broadcast on YouTube and hosted on Zoom, and then 3, 4, and 5 are just hosted on Zoom right now. We have no contract staff at this time. Really, our multimedia manager, land use planning manager, and myself have been running meetings. And then at the end of March of 2021, committee liaisons for category 3 and 4 and 5, when applicable, started hosting their own meetings. So just kind of want to note those. And then moving on, Joe, want to give some quick background, kind of where we were 2020 versus 2021 for viewership. These are stats. So as you can see in 2020 on YouTube, we had 78,000 views, 634,000 impressions, and 944 new subscribers. That was for the entirety of 2020. And then in 2021 to date, we have, so far, we're at almost 30,000 views. We might actually break that for today's meeting. We'll hit 30,000, and then 273,000 impressions. And so far we have 103 new subscribers. I also want to note that we added a second YouTube channel to accommodate our online hosting, which includes, which is designated for our land use meetings. So I felt it was really important to include those. So in 2020, of course, we had 1,700 views on our land use meetings. And then this year so far, we have 1,600 with the 13,000 impressions. But we did, of course, to accommodate our online presence and the use of our YouTube channel, we did have to add a second YouTube channel last year when we went to virtual. So the next slide is really the basis for our discussion. There's basically 4 options. I do want to note that under all options, the meetings will be broadcast on YouTube, radio, and of course our government TV. This first slide is specific for governing body meetings, and then there will be additional slides where we go over category 2 and then category 3, 4, and 5. But focusing on this slide, option 1 is basically where the governing body, which would also include the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk, would be in person. The public and staff could attend meetings virtually and would be able to interact with governing body using Zoom. These meetings, as I mentioned, would still be streamed live on YouTube, KSFR, and Comcast Channel 28. And I just want to note that right now the city of Rio Rancho and Santa Fe County are using this model. So this is, again, governing body in person, and then public and staff attending virtually. Option 2 that we would present, and of course these are all up for discussion, is that the governing body, and again, city manager, city attorney, and city clerk would be in person. Staff could attend meetings in person. Public would be virtual. In this option, staff would not be required to wear a mask if they're vaccinated. And again, meetings would still be streamed in a variety of our channels for the public to watch. Option 3 would be a governing body would be in person. The public and staff could attend meetings in person or virtual. In this case, we would have the mask requirement. And again, meetings would still be streamed. And then option 4 would just be that everyone would go back to be in person, and then we'd wear masks and again, still be streamed. avenues. So I think this is probably a great stopping point for the first round of discussion, and I stand for any questions at this time, kind of with these models.
Thank you. So this is a wide-ranging opportunity to discuss the options and state preferences or ask questions about how the differences would stack up. I don't have access to, because we're screen sharing, it's a little hard for me to see whose hands are raised. I guess Councilor Garcia and Councilor Cassett, you both have your hands up. Forgive me if I don't see you right away because it's there we go. All right, now it's easier. So we'll start with Councilor Garcia, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Christine, for the presentation. What preparations have been made with the chambers? I know that, if you go into any business across our country right now, there's plexiglass dividers between people. And so that's one update that hasn't been given to us. So what updates or preventative measures have been implemented within the council chambers?
Councilor Garcia, Mayor and Councilor Garcia, governing body. Right now, what we've worked on implementing is specific to technology because the councilors are already a distance from the city attorney, city manager, I guess, and city clerk where they stand. I'm also kind of laughing because you're technically in the chambers with your view behind you, sorry. And then we have the public. So we would do the 6 feet separations if that was an option. Again, based off of what we figured today, if governing body does go with the option of having public or staff back in the chambers, we can add plexiglass, I believe, to the area where the governing body is, but we've really focused on the technology aspect. So we have added the big screen TV and the technology that would allow us to have dual participation. So where we could have Zoom participation as well as in-person participation, and everybody could actually hear each other and talk to each other and so forth.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I guess my follow-up to that is there a reason why we didn't utilize some of our CARES Act funding to implement such preventative measures on the dais and where the city attorney and as city manager sit and where the podium is, where the public speak? I know that it'd be a bit more challenging for the audience, but I think that to me, why didn't we implement those measures when we had the resources to do so?
Did you want me to address, sorry, Mayor, Councilor Garcia, did you want me to address?
Maybe that's a better question for the city manager. I don't know who best suited for that. I think I'll pose that to the city manager then.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Garcia. I don't have a good answer. I think we can put plexiglass in the chambers. The funds were Director Wheeler, I don't know if you wanted to jump in. We used a lot of funds to prepare city facilities, and where we had people working in the time. But Director Wheeler, I don't know if you wanted to jump in there with.
I would. Thank you so much, City Manager, Mayor, and Councilor Garcia for your question. Actually, there has been a bit of work done in City Hall. There have been some air exchangers put in there, medical grade air filters, which are a great enhancement. And I really think the best way to go here is once the governing body decides what model they'd like to adopt, then we should respond with a review of what the engineering controls would be to keep people safe in that model. I think that's part of the reason we didn't make a lot of changes there, because we didn't know what configuration it would be used in next. So no need to make unnecessary and unhelpful investment. But I think that's a great point, Councilor Garcia. Thank you. We'll definitely follow up this decision-making with the governing body with a review of engineering controls that we should implement there.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, and the reason I ask is because I think that might be a determining factor in what option we present. I think the comfort level for folks is differing, whether folks have got vaccinated or not. And I think that's something we've got to also be cautious and careful of regarding privacy rights and regarding medical privacy rights. And so I think we better start thinking about that like today. What are we going to do? Are we going to implement plexiglass? Are we going to move everybody into the convention center, as I've recommended before? That way there can be appropriate spacing. And I don't think that was part of any of the options. I think all the options presented were for the chambers. Am I correct? There's not an option to host meetings in the convention center with appropriate spacing planned. So I would definitely like to explore that opportunity as well, given that we do have that space. With that, no other questions at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, Counselor. And Counselor Cassett, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Christine. For option 2, is that staff has the option to come in, but they don't necessarily have to, so they could either Zoom in or they could come in person based on their preference?
Mayor, City Councilor Cassett Sanchez, yes, that is correct. They would have the option if they would like to stay on Zoom, but they could be in person. And that would be, again, a preference of the governing body. And one of the items that we're discussing today is if they would like stop in person, if they would like staff to have the option or remain virtual.
And have we taken the opportunity to talk to staff about if they want that option, if they're happy virtual, would they like to come in person? Do we have a sense of where, especially staff that frequently present, which are primarily here, the directors, do we have a sense of what that preference looks like for them?
City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Cassett, we have an informal sense that the Zoom option is very much appreciated by staff. Oftentimes they're there for a small portion or a section of it, and especially those that end up later on in an agenda, they're able to do other things and then be available for their portion. So when asked about that level of flexibility, that is an appreciated opportunity to be able to maintain the Zoom option for meetings.
Yeah, I assumed that the Zoom option was probably something that they wanted to hold on to. I guess there's more of a question of, are there people that are itching to get out of their house and back into chambers, or not as much? Not sure. Okay.
Not from my informal conversations, but that is, again, informal conversations.
Okay, wonderful. I mean, and just in general, I know that we're looking at what the level is, but I think keeping that Zoom option, even as we continue to move past this stage of the pandemic, even as things start to improve even further and more restrictions are lifted, I think that is helpful for us to continue to explore that, both for the members of the public and staff, just for the exact reason that you stated, Jarrell, that sometimes people have to wait till 10 o'clock at night to present. So it's nice if we're not holding them in council chambers that entire time. I think the other thing that I'm struggling as we think about this in terms of safety of not just the individuals in chambers, but if we open up to the public without understanding vaccination status, with kind of trusting that people that are not wearing a mask are doing so because they are vaccinated, and to Councilor Garcia's point, it's not something that we want to really have to force people to reveal if they would rather not to. But I do have a concern about what that could potentially do to community spread at this point, while we do still have community spread of COVID in the city. So I think that's something else that we need to think about, of where our numbers are. Our vaccination rates are slowing, still increasing, but I think what was our 7-day rolling average last week? It went up from the previous 7 days. So that's still something that I do have some concern about. I think many of us on the governing body have expressed an interest to get ourselves back in person, but I'm not sure at this time that it would be responsible of us to be opening it up to the wider public right now, considering that that community spread is still there and that we do have another option. With that being said, you know, as soon as we can, it would be wonderful to get people back in. So, that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rivera, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Manager LaPan Hill, can you talk about the constraints of using the convention center under option 1?
Yes, and if I can actually turn to Christine, she can walk us through the technical side of it, and then I can pick up from there.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor Rivera, and actually Councilor Garcia, because he noted this earlier. One of the reasons we focus specifically on staying in the chambers is our TV channel is tied directly to the chambers as well as our radio. So for us to move to the convention center, we'd actually have to hire a crew. We'd have to have different camera operations. We'd have to have different sound technology implemented. And we would basically have to have, you know, an entire operation for that option. So that was one of the reasons we focused on staying in the chambers. Basically, it was just the expense, the number of individuals that would require that, and then the technology to make that work. Is basically to be financially and fiscally responsible. On my end, I only stayed with the option of meeting in the chambers because of the technology restrictions that we would have in. We also are tied through our own requirements for the TV. That is something that we post on all of our agendas. So if that's an option that the governing body would like me to pursue, then we would likely have to modify our requirements, our own personal streaming requirements for TV and radio.
All right, if we did decide to stay in council chambers, City Manager LaPan Hill, any thought into maybe only having half the governing body there at one time so that we have the ability to at least have a seat between us, or potentially putting seats below the dais so that councilors could have a table and chair and we could be a little more spread out ourselves?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Rivera, absolutely. I mean, I think we could do a number of things. Again, this is where, you know, we could, you know, the three chairs for the city manager, city clerk, those could be used as counselor spots. And then, you know, we could sit in chairs. So that is certainly an option. Where we run into a little bit of, again, well, some things are insurmountable, but you know, there are some camera angles. And again, if you're trying to, what you're trying to capture and who needs to be on a microphone, all of that becomes a little bit complicated, but we can certainly think about a way to spread out. I don't know the answer if we said, you know, 4 counselors, if we had like team A and B, 4 counselors showed up and 4 were on Zoom. I just don't know how that would work in terms of a flow of a meeting. That feels, and Christine, maybe you can answer on the technical side about how you would manage, how that would get managed.
I actually am going to let Aaron, because we are going to come to a place where we actually can't have the governing body. They will need to be in person, but Aaron, I'll kick it over to you for that piece.
Mayor, governing body, well, I think they might be interrelated, because I guess it depends on what we decide is safe. So if we were to decide it's only safe for 4 people to be there for some reason, then, and we could assign somehow 4 people that aren't able to be there because it's difficult or impossible for those, because the analysis is really specific to the person, difficult or impossible for that member to be at the meeting. So if we were to decide that only 4 members could attend, then it would be difficult or impossible for the other members to attend. So that we would have to make some sort of analysis that it's unsafe or impracticable given the technology constraints for all the governing body members to be present. And then we could create some sort of structure like that.
All right, is there a way to spread us out even more? I mean, if we're not gonna allow the public, and we'll have access to the entire building, have we looked at it? Have we looked at the setup differently than it is currently?
Christine?
I'll
have
take
you looked
I'll
at
take
the
that one.
configuration?
Sure. Mayor, Councilor Rivera, yes. Depending on the options, I think that's one of the things that I'd like to note is depending on the options that we go with, that will also dictate the layout of the room in the governing body chambers. So again, if option 4 was selected where everyone was going to be in person, then there would be a different layout. If option 1 is selected where it would be only governing body, and again, the city manager, city clerk, and city attorney in the room, then we absolutely have a different layout for what that would look like. So we've walked through what those are, but it is based a little bit on also what option the governing body selects today.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Villarreal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, staff, for providing options. As you know, I'm really antsy to get back into person. And as you're like talking about logistics, and the fact that we couldn't use the convention center, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to think of the different, I think what it depends on for me is like our vaccinations within the council. And I don't know that answer, but I'd feel more comfortable knowing that. And then that would help me make a determination about my level of feeling comfortable, and also, you know, protecting my colleagues. So that's something that I don't think we need to like express here, but it would help me to make a better decision. And then plexiglass, to me, I'm not convinced that really helps, especially for like 1 foot apart from each other. So I think we just have to utilize the room fully somehow. But again, that camera situation I didn't think about earlier. So I guess I would like to know more I know you have anecdotal information, but if you could talk to more staff to really get a sense of how they're feeling about it. Because I do like that option too, that they have the opportunity to come in if not. So I just want to express that's important. And then all I can think about is like sanitation for that room in general. Who does that? But I know we would probably have staff to be able to support that. I know this is a crazy thought, but I was just thinking, Santa Fe County has a new chamber, don't they? And they have meetings in different days than us. And I haven't seen their new chamber. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what the adaptability, but have you thought about that we could possibly share that space since it's new and it's equipped with the technology, and it's, I haven't seen it, but I'm assuming it's a lot bigger than our space.
Jarrell, have you looked into that with Catherine?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Villarreal. Yeah, so they are having their first in-person meeting today. They have their elected officials are meeting in person, and they are doing the public and staff on Zoom. So that's how they've chosen to move forward. They do meet on Tuesday, so it is a different day, but we have the same TV channel and radio channel problem. So anytime we move, we lose our ability to do TV or radio through streaming, which has been our, prior to Zoom Live, was our main source of getting to our residents. So that becomes then a different lift with, a production crew or whatever it is. So, Christine, did you want to jump in on any? You are familiar with the space.
Yeah, I do just want to know, sorry, City Manager LaPenny Hill and Councilor Woman Villarreal, that they had previously been meeting in a smaller room than the one we're meeting in, because they were meeting in the new county admin building. I'm not sure if they were able to get their technology up and going in the renovated old commission chambers. If they were, which I know they were working towards today, we could possibly talk about meeting in that building and using their technology to stream, but they previously had been meeting in the new building, which is actually smaller, much smaller than the room that we're in, or when they weren't on Zoom. I'm sorry, this is all pre-pandemic and so forth. But if you're specifically interested in meeting in the county commission chambers, we would just have to verify that their technology was put in place because they had been working to get that done.
Yeah, I didn't know the tech aspects and modifications that are needed. I just thought because they're actually physically there, but again, I think Joe or someone would have to weigh in about that. Can you just get back to us about that? And I'm curious how they're working it out. Are they wearing masks or what did they?
Again, they're doing option 1, so it's only the commission, the 5 members of the commission that are meeting. They're about half the size as well, and then staff is going to be virtual. The city of Rio Rancho is using the same model. Their council was not wearing masks during their meetings, but I'm not sure if that's because of vaccination or not. I didn't actually inquire about who's vaccinated or not due to it.
Okay, good to know. I think I don't really have any other questions. There's some unknowns I'd still like to know about before I have a complete sense of how this could function. So can you also send us those options that you presented to us right now via email? Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Vihil-Coppler, you have the floor.
Thank you. With regard to the document that we have today, it would be also good to load it onto PrimeGov so that the public can see it as well. I think they probably have a vested interest in what we are discussing and what we're doing, even if they go to it after the fact. My personal opinion is I think it would behoove us to get back to in-person meetings as soon as practicably possible. I think, I don't know, it seems like we should be concerned with avoiding the perception that we don't want to come back to public. And surely I know that we can and could have been a little bit more prepared, and we still can be. And
Hi,
so,
baby. Wanna talk?
Somebody's on the line here. I don't know who.
okay, and so that is my preference, that we get back as soon as possible. I also want to ask about disclosure requirements. As public officials, it seems like we should disclose whether we're fully vaccinated or not, and that may make a difference about how we set up in the council chambers. I'm fully vaccinated, I'll just say that so you all know. But I don't know, it was discussed earlier about how we could configure the chambers. So it seems to me that, we could have people on the dais and then a specific a number of counselors below, directly below, socially distanced. And I don't know why the camera wouldn't be able to pick that up. Now, maybe, I know there's an awful lot of cord under my desk that maybe the microphones could reach down to a table right below. But maybe that should be examined. And if it's a matter of plugging a longer cord in, that should also be studied. So it seems like maybe that would be the first opportunity to examine something that would work, to have maybe 5 and 4, and then, to be fair, depending on how long this goes on, then maybe we switch, because I don't want to be the one stuck on the bottom all the time. So, and then with regard to, maybe some counselors could call in or not. I kind of heard that maybe that wouldn't work, but even if it did, I think we should rotate, So that brings me to the next point, and that is when we discuss employees having, a choice to stay home or not, I really think we need to look at the equity of that decision and what's reasonable and not, and maybe there's trade-offs, because I know there's been some consternation among employees who are required to report and have been required to report in person, where some of their counterparts have not had to report in person and want to stay home. And so I think we really, of all the things that we talk about, I think that's one of the most important that concerns me, is that we find a way to maybe get the employees' input, because there is an equity issue, and it's not necessarily pay, it's at all. I mean, there is that, but it's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about who gets to make that decision, and why, and is it reasonable? So that's really important to me. The next item is, I've been hearing a lot of attorney opinions about whether we can ask if someone's vaccinated, even whether we can say, you get vaccinated or you don't work here. That just came up in a meeting I was in yesterday evening. So I realize we're a public agency, so there may be some difference there, but there also has been some opinions expressed by attorneys who are in the public realm. So I think we need to do more research on that and talk to differing people who actually work in our public service arena. But I'll just reiterate, I think we should get back to the chambers as soon as possible. I think we should find a way to work that. And I do think we should explore more about what it would cost to have our meetings in the chamber. I mean, in the convention center. I think that's something that I'd like to see. What are we really talking about? And if it's not that much, I think it's a public service that we have to complete as public officials, and do the public's work, and be able to have maybe a socially distanced seating chart of some sort. Now, I know I do. I've gone out to some establishments, some meetings. I've gone to various places now that we've gotten to be a little bit freer to roam the city, and other businesses are making do with following the guidelines that the state is in now. Movie theaters, basketball games, all of those things are going on around us. And if they can figure it out, then I think we can too. So certainly, I don't know if I can make a decision tonight, because we don't really have the information that we need. But my preference is to get back to doing the business in a public setting as soon as possible. Thank you.
Councilor Merritt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Everybody I've talked to, I think, wants to come back. So I don't think there's that issue. I think we all feel like we would benefit from being in person. I think what we're talking about tonight is how we do that in a safe way, and in a way where we're all comfortable with what the situation is. And I will say, as an elected official, and I want the public to know this, I am vaccinated, and I encourage everyone to go out and get vaccinated. Please do it. I think it is so important for us to encourage people to be vaccinated. It's what's going to make the difference in terms of us being able to return to normalcy and to feel safe and to move out of this pandemic. So please, people, go out and get vaccinated. The vaccines are readily available, and I just want to take this opportunity to encourage people to do it. I've done it. It's not hard, and it's really important. But I would agree with Councilwoman Villarreal that I think that is kind of the rub here, right? So if we're all vaccinated, being next to each other on the dais shouldn't be an issue. If we have some vaccine hesitancy among our group here, then that does present some issues because of the variance. Then I think we do need to think about plexiglass, masks, distancing, because that's when those things are important, is when you don't know the vaccination status of the people around you. That's when you need the protections. And so I think that's kind of the rub here. I'm curious, is the county doing anything? Are they doing plexiglass? We don't know whether they're wearing masks tonight, whether they've set up their situation differently. Are they distancing? Have they been forthcoming about their vaccination status? Anybody, any of the staff have any sense of how they've handled this same question?
Christine or
Questions?
Jarrell, do you know about the structure of any other governmental jurisdiction that's already ahead of us on the getting back to live meetings?
Romero Worth. I do know that when I spoke with Catherine, they had installed plexiglass. All of her electeds were vaccinated. I don't know how that was before last Thursday or whatever day when the mask stuff changed. So I don't know if the elected officials are wearing masks or not. I don't know. I was trying to see if we could pull up their online meeting because I think it's happening now, but I don't know the rest of the answers to your questions.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else does.
Christine, do you have some more information?
No, I was just going to note that, again, using the city of Rio Rancho, their elected officials were not socially distanced, nor were they wearing a mask. They were in their regular seats, and that's how the governing body handled their portion. And then, of course, staff and the public were attending virtually. So that was how the city of Rio Rancho handled theirs. And I don't know their vaccination status. Did not inquire, but I do know that their governing body was back in person in their normal seats.
Aaron, did you have something to add?
I did just want to comment that the matters I spoke of earlier didn't really relate to whether we could or couldn't determine vaccination status. It was just what our new orders are. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
Okay, and
Councilor Murphy?
yeah, just one other thing. I do think it's important that if we are all, wherever we all are, that we need to be visible in one camera frame. So I don't think you can have 3 people sitting where the city manager, city attorney sit, and then, the other 5 or whatever number it is, 6 of us sitting over spaced on the dais. I think it's really important that you can see all of us at the same time, particularly if you're watching from some of the other spaces, whether it's Zoom or TV or whatever. So that's my only other thought. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Thanks. Let me take a crack at a few things that I've been noting. First, if I understand the city attorney's guidance, we're going to not have the choice of not being in person. We are going to have to be in person. It's not optional. We no longer will be in a position to say that it is either impossible or inconvenient for us to do it, or whatever the 2 criteria for being out of session. We're going to be in session. So that's going to become a given. And we have the ability to do it relatively quickly. If the governing body reaches some direction for staff, I think our next governing body meeting can be in person in the council chambers, depending on how we choose to facilitate it physically. The options or the variables I think we've touched on, but let me just see if I can lay them out. First question that has been surfaced by everybody is, what is everybody's vaccination status? And I don't know that it's a matter of secrecy, but I think we can certainly divulge what our vaccination status is, because that then becomes a determining factor for a lot of other things. Second questions, the second order of business is derivative from that, and it has to do with wearing mask, not wearing mask, and social distancing, insofar as it derives from vaccination status. Then the third question that has been brought up is, what are our technological capabilities and how do we best meet our obligations to the community so that all of our operations, our conduct of public business is done in a way that is as technically available in different channels as easily and conveniently as possible. There may be a fourth variable, but I think those pretty much are the three questions we've raised about vaccination. Yes, no, mask, social distance falls out from vaccination status, and then technology is also a question of convenience, cost, and consistency. And then there are three different other variables. The first is, among those choices, how does the governing body wish to do business? Second question is, what do we think is appropriate for our staff in terms of their doing business in public or from hybrid? And then third, of course, the public. Are they joining? There's some people joining us we're in a public meeting in person, or will they continue to be in a distance technology-based participation? It strikes me that we have the first order of business is ourselves. Who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated, and as the governing body comes back into a meeting in person, depending on the answer to that question, what do we then do about masks and social distancing, and what is most easily facilitated by technology? Then the next order of business is staff, who is or isn't vaccinated among staff, and what are the preferences, as you've asked of the city manager, for department heads or other staff members who would be asked to participate in a public meeting, either from a distance or in person. And then the ultimate question is the public attendance, and that also revolves around vaccination, but it's a little trickier because there we don't know what the ability would be to screen or ascertain vaccination status. Were people, or if we wanted people in the council chambers, or if people wanted to be in the council chambers, how do you screen for vaccination with any sense of certainty without, and in fact, without doing it in a way that puts people in an uncomfortable situation? I think we have the first priority is to settle our own choices for ourselves, and then other things fall out from what we believe would be the best way for us to resume business in person and together. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And while we're on this meeting, I took a quick look at our colleagues in the county commission meeting, and they are wearing masks. I think there's a mix of folks. So I think it should be left up to the individual if they want to continue to keep each other safe. And I think that is a priority here. No matter what we decide, it's done on a safe measure. I think we're talking about vaccination like if it's the silver bullet, and we've got to remember that whether we've been vaccinated or not, we can still, according to studies, potentially catch COVID and still spread it. We've got to remember that we all have lives outside of this governing body meeting, and I'm sure each and every one of us has individuals that are at high risk. And I think we have to approach this with safety as a priority. And with that being said, if we do move to in-person meetings, I strongly believe that it should only be governing body members, and we gradually increase and grow to incorporate public participation in that matter. With that also being said, I think there should be the capability for governing body members, should they want to remote participate, that should be allowed. Everybody should not be forced to go into chamber or whatever it may be. I think we still are in the middle of this pandemic. I agree, we should move to in person, but we need to do so with safety as priority number one. I don't think that prior to the pandemic, technology has been an issue. I think we should not let that be the hiccup here in that sense. So ensuring that folks are all on one frame, that wasn't the matter before. I can remember that when we would meet in person, if the person was speaking, they would have that solo shot on camera. There might be a shot where there's 3 or 4 governing body members. It wasn't a consistent full governing body shot. So we've just got to adjust and pivot accordingly and make do of the situation that's in front of us. And let's do it in a safe manner. But I do want us to get off the mindset that vaccinations are the silver bullet. And if we've been vaccinated, we're good. I'll confirm I've been vaccinated proudly, and I encourage everybody to do so. But it doesn't mean that I couldn't potentially catch COVID or I couldn't spread it to a loved one or a family member. With that, no other comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We're at the 1 hour mark on this item. I wonder, yeah, City Manager, you want to?
Yeah, I wondered if I could just summarize perhaps where I think we're at and then be clear about some next steps. So a general consensus would be probably starting with option 1, which would be the return to governing body with staff and public on Zoom. Masks are always an option. That is everybody's personal choice. We will, if I'm getting this right, we will proceed. We will start to move down that path towards option 1, figuring out what was necessary to prepare the chambers. If plexiglass is really an important component based on the science that we know now, we can get some more details about the air filters that have been put into chambers. Start to map out some options for the setup if we have every other seat filled and then a second sort of a theater style seating, and map that out and bring to you all even tomorrow at City Council. I can probably provide some updates. Some of this stuff is pretty easy to do. Does that mostly track with people's understanding of our conversation? And then we can continue to iterate. And to Councilor Garcia's point, we're going to evolve. We'll start with this. We can add things in as we get comfortable, as the rules change, as again, as everything continues to evolve. But if I got that summary right, we'll proceed towards operationalizing option 1, understanding the safety requirements needed in place to keep the governing body safe. And then the only other question I would clarify is, we had stated that the first time we could do this is June 9th. So I would like to confirm that is comfortable for folks, or look for some direction on how to think about the date.
Councilor Aveda, and then Councilor Cassett.
Thank you, Mayor. I like Councilor Garcia's suggestion. I'm wondering is there an option where some council members could still remote in and not attend? Because I'm thinking of myself, should there be some kind of exposure at my place of work, but I am not necessarily positive, might be safer for me to Zoom in for a couple of weeks as opposed to showing up to the chambers just because I've been vaccinated. So is there an option to do, as Councilor Garcia said, where some of us can still be on Zoom if there's a situation that calls for it?
Is that a legal question or a medical question, Councilor?
Is it a possibility with the setup in the chambers question?
I believe the answer is technologically yes. We have the capacity for both in-person and remote participation.
Okay, well then, for what it's worth, I like Councilor Garcia's suggestion. We start with the council only, have that option, and then gradually increase as we go. Because I think he's right. There's life outside of City Council and exposure outside of City Council, and so we need to tread carefully as we move forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor. And Councilor Cassett, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And Councilor Garcia, I also popped on the County Commission's meeting, and it looked like they would unmask to talk. which I think is something that we need to consider about how easily we're understood on a camera with a mask on. So another piece of this puzzle that we need to think about. My question though has to do with, we have those categories. Category 1 is city council. Category 2 is our council committees, as well as I believe all the land use boards. And then category 3 is, it kept going. At this point, are we looking at just governing body meetings? Are we also talking about standing council committee meetings? Are we talking about, anything else that would be equivalent there?
If we're done with governing body, we have a bunch of slides to answer your question.
Great.
Totally fair. Yep. But so are we, if we can close out the governing body piece, and it sounds like we would add we would allow Aaron, if the city attorney agrees, that counselors could remote in at their choice.
Mayor, city manager, that counselors could remote in at their choice?
That is the request of suggestion of a number of counselors.
Based on, so what, if there is a difficulty or impossibility in being able to be present, then yes. So I would just need to be able to articulate what that is.
For each individual person.
Right, yes.
Very good. Well, I will provide a bit more of an update tomorrow at Matters from City Manager. I'll see if I can get a little bit more information, but we will proceed down the path of option 1, beginning June 9th. And then we will move quickly through. I'm noting the time, it's 5:10. This is a big portion of it. So we'll move through the other committees and keep moving. Go ahead, Christine.
Sure, thank you. Moving on in the presentation, I think we're just going to do a quick category overview again of the category 2. We have a very similar approach utilizing the technology that we've installed in the chambers. We're asking for the same direction on whether governing body would like the same option where the council committees or committees in general would still would be in person, and then the staff and public would be attending on Zoom. That would be the next decision point. And then category 3, 4, and 5, again, due to the volume of committees that we actually have, and the preference from some of the committees was to return actually to in-person. So on category 2, we would note and have scheduled out in advance that all category 2 committees would meet in the governing body chambers. They would be able to broadcast their meetings on YouTube. And if the direction of the governing body was that they would like staff and public participation to be on Zoom, then we would follow the similar model to governing body. I do also want to note, Joe, if you could go back one slide, I guess I probably could just walk through it, that this would be an increase in transparency versus pre-pandemic, where the council committees were not actually on YouTube, nor were any of the other category 2 committees. So we would be adding YouTube and archiving on YouTube as well. So I'll just kind of stop there to note that if the governing body would like to follow a similar model, then we would work to get all of our category 2s where the committee is in person and then the public and staff is on Zoom. So that would be my next spot. And I think I don't know if governing body just wants to give a quick consensus on that, or
Councilor Abeyta?
What are the legal restrictions or requirements for committees? Are they the same as governing body, where you have that reason to not be in person, or there? And what's the difference between a committee, a task force, and the different levels that we have?
Mayor, Councilor Abeyta, it's a great question. So our our council committees and some other of our committees are policymaking bodies that are subject to the Open Meetings Act, even outside our separate requirements. I'm changing to my other, I had taken off my.
So they would be required to have the same parameters as the governing body. Then we've extended the Open Meeting Act or Open Meetings Act to all of our committees, subject to our own procedures. So our own rules would also require them to follow those provisions, as well as our Emergency Procedures Act provides the same stipulations that there needs to be, one, be a declared emergency, and two, the same criteria would need to apply. So the Attorney General wouldn't have oversight of our non-policy making committees, but we have imposed that requirement ourselves.
So do we need to differentiate between the non-policy and the policy? And then is there a list of them that are and aren't?
Mayor Weber, Councilor Abeyta, I think that's how City Clerk Bustos Mihalcik has created these categories, actually. So category 2 is all subject to the Attorney General's oversight in relation to Open Meetings Act. And then I think, is it category 3, Christine, that goes into the next one where it's just our own that applies the Open Meetings Act to them.
So category 2 has to do what the council does, basically.
Essentially, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then so category 3 could decide on their own possibly what they want to do?
Well, Mayor Weber, Councilor Abeyta, we have imposed the higher standard on them ourselves, so we could change our own rules if we wished to, but otherwise the same rules would apply. But at least we have more control over them if we wanted to, say, amend our ordinance or something like that. But it's actually in our ordinance related to remote meeting.
Okay, so they're basically all then going to do what we do.
Mayor Weber, Councilor Abeyta, it may depend on, there may be different difficulties. So I think priority would certainly be given in terms of technology and access to space to the governing body. So there might be different reasons for a difficulty or impossibility to meet in person for a less crucial body. So that's possible. There could be a distinction there. Like if the governing body had the room and we needed that room in order to meet, then that would be a difficulty or impossibility.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, let's see, I think Councilor Cassett, you were next, and then Councilor Romero Worth.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think I'm following up on some of Councilor Abeyta's questions. So in this decision here, do we have the possibility to say council standing committees will come back to in-person, but the rest of category 2, there might be extenuating circumstances within those bodies that we don't know about. It's, it's a bit of a challenging decision to make for other committees right now as opposed to our own. So I'm curious if our council standing committees can come back, because if governing body's coming back, well, hey, we're already doing it. So may as well get our 3 standing council committees back too. But does that necessitate that then we extend that to the rest of category 2?
Councilor Cassett, Mayor Weber, governing body, I can address that. So I basically structured this so that category 1 and 2 could basically run the same in the same structure. To Attorney McSherry's point, category 3 and 4, 5 doesn't fall under our Open Meetings Act, is where we would kind of be the next phase. So if the governing body wanted those committees to stay all on Zoom, we could work towards that. Or if they wanted them to come back completely in person, we could work on that as well. So the way it's structured and with scheduling of the chambers, we don't have overlap and we're able to accommodate all of category 2 into this structure, where we could either maintain a meeting hosted on Zoom and streamed on YouTube, which again would increase transparency and would keep us consistent with what we've done through the pandemic. So I had already looked through that completely, and we are able to accommodate that if that's the desire of the governing body.
Right, so we're able to, but do we have to, I guess, is treat those category two, all the category two, so essentially all the land use boards, do we have to treat them the same as the city council boards in our decision here?
Yes, however, if the governing body wanted to just note that the land use committees would come back completely in person, that's something we could accommodate, and then the decision would need to be whether they wanted to, the governing body would like to continue those to be on YouTube. So at that point, the decision shifts to whether you would like the other categories to come back completely in person or to have the virtual participation option. But yes, following the Open Meetings Act requirements and our own requirements, at minimum, the policymaking members would need to be in person.
Okay, and I will just state that I do think that increasing YouTube and holding on to that is one of those things that we have gotten from this pandemic that we should hold on to and continue to stream things on YouTube and archive them. I know I find it helpful because then I can go back and watch meetings, and I know that means members of the public can watch them at their leisure as opposed to when we schedule them. And then what would this mean in these, right now we have, governing body comes back as well as in category one, clerk, attorney, and city manager. Would the support staff for those other category two boards, would they have to then come back to in person, and then the rest of staff would be Zooming in?
Councillor Cassett, Mayor, governing body, if by support staff you mean the liaison for the meeting?
Yes, thank you. That is what I mean.
Okay, perfect. I didn't know if you meant like the staff to actually produce the meeting and get everything up and going. The liaison could be right now, we would work through what staffing or additional contract support would look like for that.
Okay,
so we could make it to hire a contractor so that the liaisons wouldn't necessarily have to come back for those meetings. But we do have a lot of committees and a limited number of staff, so we do, it's all basically a balance. Again, if governing body came back, the Zoom is one of the things that triggers some additional assistance, so.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't think I have any questions, further questions at this time. This one's a little bit more challenging just in terms of it impacts more than just our body. Have we had an opportunity to speak to the rest of the category two boards that include members that are not members of the governing body and understanding where they are and how they're feeling? I guess I did have another question, sorry.
Christine or Joelle, has anybody reached out to any of those other groups to see if they have any input they'd like to make?
Mayor, Councillor Casas-Sanchez, governing body members, there has been discussion at some levels of the committees asking if they could make their own decision to come back in person completely. So there has been some discussion at that level, and I think for probably category 3 and 4, that's a really great option. We also currently would have to install additional technology in other areas for us to be able to accommodate this hybrid. The hybrid is actually a bit more demanding on staff, technology, time, and resources. So those are other things to also that we're trying to balance. And of course, as you mentioned, the need with over 50 committees, there are some committees where the members would like to come back in person for a variety of reasons. I'll use the Senior Advisory Board as an example. They would like to meet all in person and have made that request for their next meeting. There are some land use committees that have expressed possibly just coming back to in person. Again, some of what we're going to balance though is also technology. So for us to stay on YouTube, what that looks like versus, and that's how these categories were structured as well, and how kind of the decision tree was made. So right now with category 2, meeting in the governing body chambers, we can continue the YouTube, which I think we all agree has been a great benefit to our community. I think it's something that's very essential. And then categories possibly 3 and 4, if the governing body would like, we could work with each liaison and members to decide if they would like to come back in person or stay or work through a hybrid model, and how we would accommodate those.
I know it's a bit unconventional, but getting into the summer months, I don't know if we would explore an outside meeting for some of those that don't have to be streamed on YouTube. I know Mayor's Youth Advisory Board, they've been wanting to get together, and that's obviously a different discussion because they are youth, but if there's a possibility for some more like unconventional models that might increase safety and take advantage of summer weather, that might be something I'd be curious to learn more about, and where those possibilities are in terms of rules and opportunities.
And Councillor Cassett, just to follow up on that, no, categories 3 and 4 are not currently on YouTube, and they are not scheduled to be on YouTube coming back. So it's categories 1 and 2 that have been on YouTube. Categories 3 and 4 have not been on YouTube during the pandemic and would not be moving forward at this time.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Those are all my
Very good.
questions.
Thank you. Councilor Merriworth and then Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we stop sharing the screen? This slide is not particularly helpful. Can I also ask that we be emailed this presentation right away? Because this conversation about categories, I'm having trouble tracking. You all are familiar with what you put in which category, but I am not. So I'm feeling a little bit at a loss here. So while you send that to us, because I do have a question about that, I have another question. I want to go back to the city attorney and this idea of, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So it's difficult or impossible to attend. And the reason why this is the standard that we are being asked to apply now is because we are no longer under a public health emergency in the same way. It's not because there's a vaccine and we now have the ability to gather in person. It's because, well, maybe it is. Help me understand why that test now we fail and therefore we have to come back.
Mayor Weber, Councilor Romero-Worth, we don't necessarily fail, but I think there are the restrictions on our ability to do all sorts of things have been lifting consistently. I think some of the original reasons that we stopped meeting in person were the risk of infection. So that is still out there to some degree, although it is much less.
Right.
And then the restrictions on building capacity and numbers of gathering. I think we, went into offsite operations and offsite meetings and meeting remotely when the number of persons who were permitted to gather was limited to 5. So that didn't allow us to have the whole governing body meet at all. Although there were some interpretations of the orders that they didn't apply to necessary public business, but in order, I think there was a very good reason not to meet in public, and I think that reason has persisted. So under our rule about remote meeting, we require there to be a declared emergency. It does not say specifically city versus state, but it's in our City Emergency Proclamation Act. So I would interpret that as a city declared emergency. We currently do have a declared emergency. So under Open Meetings Act, you're not allowed to meet remotely unless your local rules permit it. So we actually, within the last year and a half or so, created that local rule. We didn't even have that previously. A lot of local governments had to come into an emergency session to pass that local rule to then enable them to meet remotely. Thankfully, we had it, and then we extended it to our committees. So that's the first factor in our local rule, which we're allowed to make more stringent than the state's rule. And so in our local rule, we require that there be a declared emergency. That's a first requirement. And then we follow the Open Meetings Act requirements, which are that it must be difficult or impossible for a member to appear in person. So there's not really a case law as to what that means. I think that given a pandemic and an infectious situation, we can certainly be liberal in our interpretation and application of that. But at the same time, as more people get vaccinated and as the immunity of the community increases, there will be less and less of a justification to have that rule apply.
And so the declared emergency is at the state level or our emergency proclamation? What's triggering the analysis?
Mayor Weber, Councilor Merworth, our local rule requires a declared emergency. It doesn't specify which of the two, but it is in our local ordinance where we describe the parameters for a locally declared emergency. So my best interpretation of that would be that it's a city declared emergency. But we could also look at it as a state declared emergency. There's nothing precluding that right now.
And that's not subject to completely go away for a bit yet, is it?
Mayor Weber, Councilor, the mayor is able to proclaim emergency for 3 days, and he proclaimed one yesterday, and it's on the council's agenda for a 47-day extension tomorrow. But that is just one of the two criteria, right? So it has to be both an emergency and difficult or impossible.
Okay. And I guess, yeah, so I don't know, there's part of me that thinks maybe we're premature even in contemplating this, given everybody's, I think we all want to come back together, but again, we still want to be safe. So I know we're on limited time, I won't prolong. I want to talk about the fact that I think the fact that our committees are on YouTube is really important. I too do not want to lose that. I had wanted us to get the committees on YouTube prior to the pandemic, and it was too expensive and the technology wasn't available. And so now I completely agree that now we have that. Let's not lose that. And I guess I would also just say that, I think as we move through these different categories, and thank you, Christine, for sending this. This is very helpful now to be looking at what category 2 is. As we look at category 2 and go through category 3 and 4, I think everybody's going to have sort of the similar concerns, right? Is what's their comfort level? What's their vaccination level? It gets more murky there about whether people will want to volunteer their vaccination status, and to the point of we all have lives outside of this, and we interact with people who may be at risk, and so you're increasing their exposure as you interact more. So I just think our comfort levels, whatever our comfort level is got to transcend itself as we move through these categories. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Garcia and then Councilwoman Villarreal, and I have an eye on the clock. It's 5:30 and we haven't spoken about item B tonight yet. So I don't know exactly how we will manage our time, but I know there's still discussion on this item. So I will go to you, Councilor Garcia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Councilor Romero-Worth kind of hit on some of the questions I had. I guess my only follow-up to that would be, have we reached out to the Attorney General's office in regards to the guidance that they might be looking at? I just look at other governing bodies, whether it be state or even federal, where they're continuing with the hybrid model. And I want us to be able to not only react to what the needs are now, but also begin to plan for what our needs will be for the future. So with that, I don't know if we've reached out to the Attorney General's office to see what future guidance might be given.
However, Councilor Garcia, I can reach out to them. We did reach out during the course of the pandemic at a few times to see if they were going to update their guidance that came out initially. And we hadn't gotten any updates to that, but it's possible they're going to update it. So I can ask again.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. No other questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilwoman Villarreal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question about category 4, which is the joint bodies. if those entities wanted to meet at the county, would they be able to do so?
Is that, I guess, city manager, or is that something you might explore? Whether they have the option of meeting not at a county facility rather than at one of our own? Suppose that'd be an outreach to Catherine and her team.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Villarreal, I don't know the answer, but I can certainly find out. It seems like a very viable option.
Yeah, I mean, it already occurred pre-pandemic, so I'm just curious if that could still continue based on the joint entities decision. And then I was just curious, you're saying category 3, it would be up to them if they want to meet in person, or those would stay remote?
Christine, I think you spoke about the people in those groups wanting certain things. Were you suggesting they could decide on their own?
Councilwoman Villarreal, Mayor Weber, members of the governing body, there have been some committees within category 3 that have requested that they go back completely in person. So I did note that if that was at the request of the committee or the committee liaison, that that could be an option. I do want to note for category 3, if we were to have public participation, we'd have to work with the liaisons to see how we could accommodate a person. Those of course would be in different rooms, and we'd have laptops, and they'd be a different structure than the one that we would be using for governing body and then other category 2.
Yeah, it seems a little bit more complicated, because then to allow for public participation, it would depend on where they're at. And yeah, so I think that I'd like to know more about that and understand how that will work. I'm sure they would too. So are you all going to give us additional information about that?
Councilwoman Villarreal, sorry. I also just wanted to note 2 other things. One is that category 3 doesn't traditionally have public comment or public participation, similar to how Public Works Utilities does, but finance and quality of life does not. So those are also things that we took into consideration. But we have a large volume of committees in general. And so in category 3, part of why the public could potentially participate on Zoom, it would be in the listening in participation that they would be in now. And so a laptop could potentially accommodate that, with, again, members being in person for their meeting locations. And as Councilor Cassett did mention earlier, we did have a committee ask if they could meet outside, which would not violate anything at this time. So I think committees are trying to get creative because they do want to meet. So just
okay,
some facts.
Just the last question on category 2, we list the MPO. And then we also have category 3, the MPO in that section 2. So just need clarification on that. The Transportation Policy Board is MPO, so.
Yes, we did have the technical coordinating committee and the transportation. I think that should be coordinating committee in category 3, but I can work to update that as well.
But in category 2, you list MPO. So that is the same thing. So I just think we need to know an MPO for category 2 or category 3.
Okay, I apologize. I thought that the technical coordinating committee was a subcommittee of the MPO, so I apologize.
No, it is. That's the technical pieces, but it's also listing the Transportation Policy Board is also on category 3.
Got it.
Thank you.
Councilor Vihel-Coppler, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the Joint Powers boards, specifically Solid Waste Management and Buckman Direct Diversion. It seems to me that this body wouldn't have direct jurisdiction, and that those discussions should be between the chairs, the executive directors, and the attorney, their attorney. So that discussion, I think, needs to take place there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? We've got about 20 minutes to go, and we have another item to address. So maybe we should park this for more consideration, some feedback, some questions have been raised, and move to item B on the agenda. Christine, do you want to just mention for the folks who are listening or watching what item B, 7B is?
Yes, Mayor. Sorry, I have all my notes and one second. I got lost in my presentation. Item 7B is discussion on returning to on-site work and in-person services. And our city manager, Jarrell LaPenhill, will also be guiding that discussion.
Jarrell?
Thank you. Joe or Christine, whoever has the slide powers, would you guys bring that up? This is a quicker conversation. I'll lay out some of where we're at, and then I'd love, again, feedback and reaction to what we've said. So this is less detailed, still complicated, but less detailed. Joe, go ahead and keep sliding through. I think it starts on, there we go. Okay, so again, this is all about increase in on-site operations. It's a bit of a misnomer to say return to work. As you know, many of our dedicated team have been working on-site for this whole time. I listed our teams that have been on-site. Again, we have some that have teleworked, but a majority of our teams have been working. So what we are doing now is looking to increase our on-site services, but really want to acknowledge the people who have been day in and day out, been there through it all. So many kudos go to them. Go ahead, Joe, go to the next slide. So again, what we've been working on to make sure we have a safe return for those who haven't been in the office, and just an overall increase in people. Myself, finance, IT, and HR met with all of the departments to review their needs. We've got a checklist to ensure buildings are adequately equipped. We're doing a technology review. And of course, continuing to make sure that the basic hygiene components are there. One important piece as we look at the IT assessment is to note the guidance we got is it's very important that we do this in a phased approach. We don't want to have all those who haven't been in their offices return on one day and essentially blow a fuse, right? Not be able to, the computers that haven't been updated will be out of date. So we are working with each department and work site to make sure that they are ready to go, and they will start returning folks as they go. Go ahead, Joe, next slide. So where we're working to continue to build things out, again, our policies, making sure that employees understand what is required of them. A key piece of this is maintaining and building out our flexible work arrangement. I think much like the conversation around YouTube, our ability to have city staff where it's acceptable for their job classification to be able to telework, to be able to have a flexible work arrangement is really important. And so working to be able to make sure that we can maintain that component, again, where it's applicable, where it's appropriate, so that we can both, of course, make sure that our public services are maintained, but that's an option for those. And you see that across the board. Employers are looking, again, to manage that flexibility. I will say the county is maintaining their hybrid approach. And so that's what we are working with. And last slide, I think it is the last slide. So then, of course, knowing that a majority of our staff have been already working, obviously the big thing is City Hall. Because the day we can open those doors, it feels like we're in a very different environment. We're working with facilities. The plan is to create a central entrance because, as you all mentioned, we've all been in businesses. This isn't, everything is different now. So you come in, you're greeted by someone, you are directed to where you're needing to go. It's actually something we've talked about, sort of pre-pandemic, right? To be able to not just have folks wandering around, but really direct their experience in City Hall. So we are working to create a reception area that will allow the flow of the public, and keeping the north and south entrances locked so that we've got this central flow of entrance. And again, the goal is to have all on-site operations, return to on-site operations by the end of June. Specifically not setting a hard date because each work site is in a different place. And then again, where telework is an option, working with the managers to make that a viable option. So that is the way we are looking at it. Again, very aware that the state will continues to issue new guidance. It does seem like they are operating on a similar model. Each department is setting their own, the way they're going to have their employees return. And it seems to be a pretty big mix, some combinations of remote and in person. So with that, I wanted to share the way we're thinking about it and get your feedback as to what else you want us to consider, reactions to the time frame, and anything else you would want us to think about.
Thank you. We've got a good time to ask questions or deliver some thoughts to the city manager and the team about what other factors you'd like to be looked into. Councilwoman Villarreal, followed by Councilor Cassidy.
Thank you,
And then
Mr.
Councilor Bader.
Thank you. And just based on the presentation, are you saying that staff members that say have kids that aren't at the age that can get vaccinated, they have the opportunity to still work remotely at this time?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Villarreal, if a person is in a job classification that is eligible to telework, then we will work to ensure that they have that flexible work arrangement. There are some instances where telework isn't possible. So if they're in that job classification, then it isn't something that would be an option. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated, but if you're in a position that it's available to, then yes.
Okay, and then I guess I'm just thinking about folks that have kids, especially this summer. There's less camps. There's less people that feel comfortable with camps. And so I just want to make sure that we're going to give our staff the opportunity. Obviously, it's going to depend on their position, but those that have been working remotely to still kind of have to make sure we have that option for them, since they'll probably have their kids at home this summer. I mean, not in all cases, but just seeing how things are going for our summer camp numbers, and then just the possibility, or just hearing from friends about how there's less options for their kids. Want to make sure we have that, because I wouldn't want to have staff who is now kind of transitioning back to their office have to bring their kids to the office. So is that what I'm hearing?
Thank you for that. And it's certainly in the forefront of my mind. So yes.
Yep, I think it's hard to figure out these scenarios because each department's so different and different situations. So I just hope that the outreach is taking into consideration that this is kind of a case by case situation, not that every kind of model is going to work for each department. So I just want to hear from you all that that's the case, that's how you're approaching it. Is that yes? Yeah.
Oh, yes, that is how we are approaching it.
Thanks. All right, that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Cassett and then Councilor Abeyta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I also wanted to speak to some of the home situations, whether it's kids who are elementary school aged, or just the shortage of childcare across the city has been a problem. I know I've spoken about it quite a bit. And then also the consideration of individuals who might not be able to get vaccinated because of pre-existing conditions that puts them at a heightened risk for COVID, people who have spouses at home who are at a heightened risk for COVID. And so it sounds like with each individual case, we'll have to be looking at our possibilities for continuing to allow remote work. Am I understanding that correctly? I see the city attorney.
Aaron, did you want to address that, or you have a point you want to make on this?
Mayor Weber, councilors, two things. So on the case by case, I think in the initial instance related to teleworking, it's related case by case by the position. For example, we can't allow a lifeguard to telework, obviously, right? Like that position has to be on site regardless if you have children or not, right? Then there's other positions where we're going to allow teleworking if the position allows for it and the flexibility is there to work with people. And I think we're looking at updating that telework policy. So it hasn't been updated yet. Then there's the case by case for medical conditions. So that really would be looking at the person, right? And whether or not they can be reasonably accommodated given whatever their circumstances are. And so that will be extremely case by case, because then you look at the job and the situation and the person's medical condition. So that's even more particularized.
So then it's kind of to that point, Aaron, so if there's somebody, for example, like the kid situation, well, no, not the kid situation. So basically people have the option to work at home if there is an extenuating circumstance. But if there's not an extenuating circumstance, we're saying, hey, it's time to come back. Am I understanding that correctly?
Mayor Weber, Councilor Cassett, extenuating circumstance is not the legal category. So it really would be based on a medical situation, and that falls into ADA and reasonable accommodation. So that is its own category and own legal framework. So that would be a different criteria or criterion than these other situations. And I think the city manager is looking for your input as we develop this new teleworking policy, because we are going to need to update it. So this type of feedback as to how long to extend the kind of maximum flexibility we've had now versus less, what is that middle ground? Is there a middle ground, or is it always maximum going forward forever? That kind of thing. I think that's the kind of feedback that she's probably looking for.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that clarification. And that is it's a very good, it's a really good question. And there's a lot of, a lot more than we can bite off in the next 10 minutes. Okay, thank you. And then I'll think. And then in terms of I think there's something I'm sorry, I'm looking at the slides. Basically a slow roll, a rolling return date. How is that being decided of who rolls in first and who rolls in later?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Cassett, thank you for the question. So that is based on the assessments that are currently being done by IT and Public Works. So we're a wide diaspora. So some of the areas are ready to go and it's not very complicated. Others, have had folks working, and so it's a quick turnaround. So they're working with each department and then the overall work site. So like Market Station is a very different situation than HR, because HR could, so we're going to be on a rolling basis based on the assessment once they determine that the technology is ready and the space is ready for people to come back. And then to Aaron's point, the telework, right now we've allowed for maximum flexibility. So you could telework 1 day a week, you could work 5 days a week, and we didn't sort of, that was up to you and your manager, whatever was gonna work. So now that is where we're starting. And, it could evolve into, 2 days a week, it could evolve into whatever it is. So that's the next phase of this.
And that's that consideration of what does this look like almost permanently going forward. And I know that, Jarrell, you and I have had some offline conversations about, do we start to look at our city footprint, and do we look at shared workspaces? And
how do we keep recruiting the workforce of the future who, part of the flexibility, but and it to Councilor Vihel-Coppler's point, it's really complicated because we offer such a diverse array of services. The jobs are all very different. And so there isn't a one size fits all solution. Some require you to be on site, no questions asked, and others don't. And so that's part of what we have an opportunity, I think, to wrestle with and decide how that we, the city as an employer, want to recruit and retain people.
Yeah, I do think it's a really interesting conversation to start talking about those flexible work schedules. I know it's a conversation a lot among working mothers who frequently are the ones that are doing a lot of the juggling. And then I know it's a big conversation among, I believe they're called the sandwich generation, the generation that's raising kids as well as taking care of like aging parents. So I agree. I think that there really is an opportunity to explore here, and it's going to take a lot of thought and consideration, but there is this component that not all of our jobs are going to be able to take advantage of that. And what does that start to look like? So I'm glad that we're having the conversation. It's definitely no easy answer there, but I do appreciate that this is something that we are looking into, and I would be curious about, staff feedback, what has worked well working from home, what hasn't worked well, what are things that we do want to keep, and what are things that really need to fall by the wayside once we can let go of them because this pandemic's over. So I look forward to continuing this discussion, but that'll be it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Abeyta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez really just addressed all my points about telecommuting and teleworking. I think we have an opportunity. I think there were probably some efficiencies that were realized over this last pandemic related to teleworking, and we shouldn't go back to the old way just because that's what everyone else was doing or the pandemic is over, so let's do that. I think where we do have opportunities and where we did realize some efficiencies, we should continue to explore how we allow that to keep happening. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. It's about 5 to 6. So if there are any closing thoughts that you'd like our team to explore, questions you think have really surfaced by virtue of the presentation that you'd like answers to, so we can make a more smooth and thought through re-entry. I think it is interesting. A year ago when we closed things down because we had to, I thought everybody did a remarkable job of really rising up for the situation and making the best of it, and keeping our employees safe and providing the technology for distance working and identifying who couldn't, and when the circumstances provide for it, who could do a hybrid work situation. And here we are a little more than a year later, and now we are doing the opposite in effect, which is to say, okay, as we bring folks back on site, what is the right way to spool that? And what do we do to maintain the gains in productivity and innovation that have been achieved? How do we take individual circumstances into account as much and as sensitively as possible? How do we maintain and improve the efficiency and productivity of city government? So it's the right conversation to be having right now. Jarrell, is there anything you would like to summarize with at this point about where you think we go next, what you will be moving forward with?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for engaging in this level of conversation. I hope it felt constructive, and I think please continue it. We can do it one-on-one. We can gather, but I think, as I said, but we're living in these uncertain times, and I really we want to do right by the public, by our employees, and also build on what we've gone through over the last year, and move forward where we've had some successes. So I just appreciate the engagement. I will get as much details to report back tomorrow, and then we'll keep moving forward. So with that, if there are no other comments, we will stick to on time. we'll get 3 minutes back. And I just genuinely appreciate the time, the feedback, and the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We will pick this up with more answers to the questions that have been raised on both item A and B, and resume the discussion with more feedback and options, and then hopefully be back with a decision about the forthcoming council meeting, and then the return people working on site. So I appreciate it. Good discourse, good exchange of ideas. I will see everybody tomorrow for a regularly scheduled meeting of the governing body. This meeting is